This 4-cylinder 2.7 liter TurboMax engine is putting out more torque than the 5.7 liter Hemi, the 6.4 liter Hemi, the 5 liter Coyote, and even GM's own 5.3 liter V8. So today we're gonna see how that torque translates to towing my 8,000 pound enclosed trailer down the highway. Well, GM said they tested this engine very well. I hope they did. Welcome back, I'm Alex. We are continuing our mini series with this Chevy 1500 with the very interesting 2.7 liter TurboMax. I towed with this exact engine over a year ago. However, I towed my 28-foot flat deck trailer, and a number of you guys said, well, there's no wind resistance. Most people aren't towing trailer setups like this, and I completely agree. So I put my money where my mouth is. We bought this trailer and I'm very excited to see how this engine once again handles an 8,000 pound load with this time maximum wind resistance. This 4-cylinder engine's putting out 310 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque, 90% of which is available at only 1,500 RPM, which is pretty impressive and probably one of the main reasons why this engine can tow up to 9,500 pounds. This is my 8,000 pound trailer, extra wide, extra tall. We use the same water weights at the same location, giving us the exact same tongue weight. We also tow the same 200 kilometer loop, giving us a really nice comparison between truck and engine when it comes to things like acceleration, pulling different hills, fuel economy, and even engine braking. And speaking of download torque, let's see how well this engine and this truck transfer that torque to the wheels to get a load moving. With our first acceleration test, we go 0 to 50 kilometers an hour, put the truck in 4-wheel drive, and time it. All right, we're in 4-wheel drive tow haul mode. 3, 2, 1, to the floor. Woo! 50, just like that. Once that turbo spools up, it actually has a good kick. Wow. Take 2, 3, 2, 1, to the floor. Oh yeah, once that boost hits, you're off and running. 50, just like that. I definitely don't think we're faster than the EcoBoost, but for a 4-cylinder engine, that's no slouch. Let's get this engine on my 200 kilometer towing loop and see what she's got. So we reset our fuel economy. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. The other thing you may have noticed is we have a good old check engine light right there. I did plug into it and it's an evap code of some kind. I cleared it, it came back this morning. Not the best start, but we should be just fine. Now, when I towed with this engine over a year ago with my flat deck, I was actually quite impressed how well this engine handled the load. I am very surprised at how well this engine performed. And again, going around town at these lesser speeds where the wind resistance really isn't so much of a factor, at least, this engine, once again, it works very well. Something you just don't expect out of this small of an engine is the amount of get up and go. And once the turbo gets spooled up, this truck just moves. It moves very well. And speaking of moving, we have our second acceleration test on the docket here. We go 60 kilometers an hour to 110, which is our cruising speed, as we get onto the highway nice and safely. 60, to the floor. Right to red line, baby. Woo! 100. 110. Just like that. That is definitely on the slower side of acceleration, but you know what? Acceleration is not the end-all and be-all when it comes to towing. So we'll set our cruise control and let this truck do its thing. We got our cruise control set to 110. We got a quarter tank of fuel. We'll see if that gets us to the gas station. I don't know. This thing might drink a ton of fuel. I suspect it will, so keep an eye on that. Secondly, last time I towed, I called this engine a sewing machine like 18 times, so we won't do that again. I was expecting that engine to rev like crazy, and it didn't. And I suspect that'll be the same for this run. potentially even revving less than some V8s. Now that's probably mainly due to the massive stroke in this 4-cylinder engine, 4.01 inches, which to put in perspective is larger than the 6.6 liter Duramax. Alongside the very large stroke, we have our cylinder bores that are actually slightly offset from the crankshaft. This gives a number of benefits, but in terms of torque generation, it allows the connecting rod to be much closer to 90 degrees and gives it a greater mechanical advantage to transfer all that cylinder pressure onto the connecting rod, generating much more torque. The third reason why this engine probably won't rev as high is because of the turbocharger. When it comes to towing, having a turbocharger is a wonderful advantage because instead of the engine having to downshift to generate more torque to the rear wheels when going up hills to keep that load moving at a certain speed, the turbo can simply spool up and push more air into the engine, and that is going to generate more power, more torque without having to actually downshift. So those are the three reasons why I think that this engine will not have to rev as high as you might think. Here's our first little hill here, nothing crazy, but just a good indicator of where these engines kind of sit right off the bat. 3,000 RPM. I feel like we're gonna downshift again. Look at that, on fire with the predictions. 4,000 RPM. So, I mean, yeah, she certainly is having to, whoa! Whoa! 5,000 RPM blows my prediction out of the water. This thing is working hard. Well, it's a real world test for a reason, I guess. 5,200 RPM. So I guess just take everything I said in the shop and throw it out the window. This thing only has 2.7 liters of displacement, and eventually we're gonna hit that limit. And despite this engine certainly being designed with great torque generation in mind, maybe with all this wind resistance behind us, we are approaching it. Let's see this baby put some work in. 3,000 RPM. We got a little bit of a decent hill here. Oh baby, downshift. 4,000 RPM. I think she might shift again. Yep. Woo! 5,000 RPM. This thing is humming. Now, I will say, very nicely balanced. Nice and smooth at 5,000 RPM. Pretty decently quiet too. You guys can still hear me pretty decently, I hope. But it does seem when you get on any decent type of grade with this kind of load, this will be the result. It's doing it. It's doing it just fine, but she will be working. And we are not even on the backstretch with the big hills through the Appalachian Mountains. Oh boy. Oh boy. She is loving this. Well, GM said they tested this engine very well. I hope they did. Woo! Now, in terms of transmissions, we're sitting around 100 degrees Celsius, and we like to be cruising around 6th gear on most flat stretches, which in this 8-speed transmission is 1-to-1. I actually really like that. I think when you're towing a heavier load, which for this engine, this load certainly is, to be able to stick around a 1-to-1 drive ratio in the transmission, to me is exactly where you want to be. And in terms of fuel economy, we're sitting at 36.4 liters per 100 kilometers. I'll put the miles per gallon on the screen. Usually on the backstretch, we actually burn less fuel. So this number should, in theory, come down. Now, speaking of transmission and driveline, there are a couple of things I wish GM may consider doing in the future. First off is putting their flagship 10-speed transmission in behind this engine. This 2.7L TURBOMAX comes with the 8-speed transmission, which is fine, but I think having those 2 extra gears, especially when towing, could make a pretty large difference. The second thing that I'd like to see GM potentially look at is maybe adding some additional gearing to this this engine platform. Currently, you can only get 342 gears with the 2.7 liter engine, which is fine, but it would be cool to be able to get 373s, or maybe even for someone who knows they're not going to be towing, getting even a lower gear like a 315 or 321 to maximize fuel economy. Either way, having gearing options is always a good thing in my eyes. Where Ford, for example, with their own 2.7 liter engine has 315 options, 331, 355, and even 373 gearing options, some of which even come with full-on electric locking axles, which is just a really nice option. Well, we made it to the Irving, our halfway stop. I've made the executive decision to actually put some fuel in the gas tank because I don't think we're gonna make it back. This thing was thirsty. $100 later, 63 liters. I don't know, is this a 100-liter tank? It might not be. We're fueled up. I got some hydration myself. We're gonna head on the back stretch back through the Appalachian Mountains. We got some bigger hills. Let me know what you guys think. Think we're gonna put a rod through this block? Sure hope not. Well, back into the working RPMs on the back stretch. 4,000 RPM. Again, just another nice little hill here. Nothing crazy, but once this thing gets under, or once this truck goes up any grade with this engine, we are downshifting. Woo! 5,000 RPM. And as you guys can see, I mean, the camera doesn't really pick it up, but really not too much of a grade. Back to 5,000 RPM. Again, any type of decent grade, this thing is downshifting pretty heavily. Look at us making a frickin' pass here. What do we got? Oh, a Super Duty, that's cute. 6.7 liters of displacement. 2.7 right here, baby, making the pass. Well, we were coming to the biggest hill on our towing stretch here. Here we go. 3,000 RPM. Downshift. This engine, this truck is very responsive, which I like. Boom! 5,000 RPM. Still at 110 quite nicely. But we're gonna be chugging up this thing the whole time. Pretty deep into our RPM band. I can probably confidently say we cannot downshift again. This is it. This is all this engine's got. And we are actually under speed 106. We should be at 110. But like I said, this is all she's got right now. Just barely keeping us at 106. 107. $108. Atta girl, atta girl. That's good stuff. Well, a lot of the same as we round up this hill here. 4,000 RPM. Oh yeah, here comes a good old Cummins ripping by. Holy, that's how, ooh, nice trailer too. And this engine does seem to sustain these high RPMs pretty nicely. Like I said, our temperatures, our gauges, they're doing just fine. Oh, we're dropping some speed here. Oh yeah, we are dropping some speed. Come on, TurboMax, let's go. There we go. Oh boy, we're starting to really struggle a little bit. We're on a pretty much a flat stretch, and this thing is just at 4,000 RPM for like the last minute. I don't know if she's getting a little hot. Our gauges say no, but you know, early in our run, we were staying in 6th gear, closer to like 2,500 RPM. I don't know. I mean, we're not really facing a headwind. We don't have much wind today in general. She's just not happy. And speaking of revs, we are approaching the end of our highway loop here. We are averaging 39.1 liters per 100 kilometers, which is a lot more than what I thought. But it could be just this backstretch. For whatever reason, we were revving significantly higher, like you guys just saw. Well, we made her back in one piece. We dropped the trailer. It's time for a little bit of a conclusion. I got a couple things to say. First and foremost, I feel like this smaller displacement engine, the 2.7 liter, it struggled the most going from that flatbed trailer to the enclosed trailer. Both the EcoBoost and the 5 liter definitely struggled more with the enclosed trailer, but this thing pulled that flat deck extremely well. And then in comparison to the enclosed, it was a very large difference. And at the end there, you guys saw this thing it just started to struggle. I don't know if it was getting too hot, but it was just not happy pulling that much weight with that much wind resistance. If you guys are looking to tow a 6, 7, 8,000 pound trailer with a pretty large wind frontage like a big travel trailer at highway speeds, this engine, it'll certainly do it, but it's just not gonna be happy. I would recommend going with something like maybe even the 3 liter Duramax, the 5.3, or if you want the best towing experience out of a Chevy, getting that 6.2 liter V8. You're not gonna be disappointed if you're towing something that heavy with that much wind frontage. If, however, you're not towing at highway speeds, this thing towed that trailer perfectly fine at lower speeds. So, I mean, this is maybe 50 miles an hour, 85 kilometers an hour. This thing tows wonderfully, even with that wind resistance. I mean, we're at like 1800 RPM. So it's just at the highway speeds, I think we are really pushing this engine. Let me know what you guys think. If you own one of these trucks, if you've towed with them, how was your experience? But if you did like the video, don't forget to leave that thumbs up. And as always, guys, if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe. Happy Canada Day to everybody. It is July 1 today. And anyways, I'm gonna head out. We'll see you in the next freaking video.